A number of years ago during COVID, after our worship service here, I think it was on Thursday nights at the time, we went to Bawadi Mall after the service for a meal. And while we were grabbing a meal there, I was sitting and talking with one of our members, and he was sharing about how he wasn't looking forward to traveling back to his home country, which he was set to do in the next month. And that surprised me a little bit because most of us look forward to traveling back to our home country. And he said, "Oh no, those people will ruin your life." And I thought, man, that's not the way I view my family, praise God. But as I was asking, I was thinking, they'll ruin your life like they'll fill your schedule too full of different things, or they'll pressure you to give them money that you're earning here in the UAE. Is that it? He said, "Oh no, Pastor, they'll curse you." I said, "What does that mean?" And this brother said, because of your prosperity that they think you have here in the UAE, they will go to a witch doctor and they will want the witch doctor to curse you. This is common for a number of us in our home cultures, in our home countries. When we experience blessing, whether it's a new job or whether it's the opportunity to travel, whether it's marriage, people may, on the outside, say good things about us or congratulations or encouragements, but on the inside, behind the scenes, they are envious of us. They not only wish that they had what we have, but they don't want us to have it. And they're willing to stand in the way if it's possible. What makes a person do that? A person does that because they resent other people. And they resent what God has not given to them. Envy. To envy means that you not only want what other people have, but you resent that other people have it. Envy is a problem that has been around since the beginning of sin entering into the world. Cain killed his brother Abel because he envied the acceptance. He not only wanted acceptance himself, he hated his brother, that his brother was accepted and he wasn't. Joseph's brothers sold him into slavery because they envied the favor that he had with his father. And in 1 Samuel 18, we see that Saul, the king of Israel, envies David. He is consumed with his envy, seeing David, a loyal servant, as an enemy, as a threat, because he's envious and resentful of the honor that David is receiving. Envy. It will consume you. If left unchecked, it will destroy churches. It will destroy families. It will destroy your soul. And so it's important for us to know not just what envy is, but how to fight it. And in 1 Samuel 18, we see a strategy, I would say the strategy, for fighting envy. And so we're going to walk through this passage, and then we're going to look at understanding envy, and then we're going to look at combating envy. First, a walkthrough. 1 Samuel 18 picks up immediately after 1 Samuel 17 ends with David defeating Goliath. David, we have seen, is called to Saul in Saul's presence, and he gives him his name. And as soon as he had finished speaking to Saul, the soul of Jonathan, Saul's son, was knit to the soul of David. And Jonathan loved him as his own soul. And Saul took him that day and would not let him return to his father's house. Then Jonathan made a covenant with David because he loved him as his own soul. And Jonathan stripped himself of the robe that was on him and gave it to David, and his armor, and even his sword, and his bow, and his belt. Saul's been speaking to David after David has struck down Goliath, that giant who defied the armies of Yahweh. David's zeal for the glory of God compelled him to stand and fight when everyone else cowered or fled. And Jonathan, as a fellow soldier who is zealous for God's glory, immediately sees David and thinks, "You're my guy. My soul is knit to you." They are kindred souls, soulmates. Not in a romantic sense, but in that they love the same thing. Both Jonathan and David love God's glory. We've already seen this with Jonathan. Before Christmas, we saw in chapter 14 of Samuel that while Saul is seeking his own glory, Jonathan seeks the glory of God. Jonathan goes out and fights the Philistines while Saul is hanging out with his men in his tent. Like David, while Saul is cowering back, Jonathan goes and fights. And so as he sees David, this man consumed with the glory of God, they're bound together. And to show that they're bound together, Jonathan makes a covenant, an agreement with David. He binds him to David. Jonathan is the king's son. Jonathan is the heir to the throne. If anyone should eye David with suspicion, it's probably Jonathan. He's the one who is set to get the kingdom. But that's not how Jonathan views David. Jonathan strips himself of his royal robes and his armor, and he clothes David with them. He gives them to David. This is similar on the outside to what we saw Saul doing last chapter. Last chapter, Saul gives David his armor so that David can go out and fight against Goliath. Jonathan doesn't do it for the reasons why Saul does it, though. Saul does it to take credit for the victory. Saul does it because he trusts in things like armor and power and might. Jonathan gives David his armor because he loves David. He's clothing David with glory. This is a similar action to what a foreign leader might do. You guys know the bisht, the robe that goes over the kandora that we often see the rulers wearing, especially when they meet with foreign leaders. A number of years ago during the World Cup, some of you may remember, Lionel Messi was clothed with the bisht, the robe from the emir of Qatar. By clothing David with his own robes, Jonathan is bestowing one of the highest honors that he could upon David. But there's a difference between what he did and what the emir of Qatar did. When the emir of Qatar gave Messi the bisht, he didn't take his own off and give it to Messi. But Jonathan strips himself of his might, his glory, his honor, and gives it to David. And David went out, verse 5, and was successful wherever Saul sent him, so that Saul set him over the men of war. And this was good in the sight of all the people and also in the sight of Saul. David joins Saul's army, successful where he goes. And Jonathan's not the only person who loves him. All the people love him. We see in verse 6, as they were coming home, when David returned from striking down the Philistine, the women came out of all the cities of Israel singing and dancing to meet King Saul with tambourines and shouts of joy, with musical instruments. And the women sang to one another and they celebrated, saying, "Saul has struck down his thousands, David his 10,000s. David's being honored here. The people see his victory in battle. They love him. It says it's pleasing in the sight of Saul's servants. And this singing and dancing that's happening as the women are going out to meet David and meet Saul is an echo of the Exodus. In the Exodus, Israel crosses through the Red Sea. Pharaoh is described as a sea serpent who is crushed by God. And Miriam leads the women in dancing and singing with the tambourines. David here and Saul are returning from the bronze serpent Goliath being crushed. And all of Israel goes out and women are dancing and singing beforehand. All the people love David, except for one. Saul is envious of David. Saul sees David receiving this honor. Honor that Saul gave to David by his own fear and cowardice. Saul was the one who should have gone out and fought the giant. We saw that last week. He bribed David to go do it. David does it, is honored for it, and now Saul is jealous and envious of David. The king of Israel, who cowered in his tent, covets the honor that David's receiving. Verse 8 says that Saul was very angry, and the saying displeased him. He said, "They have ascribed to David 10,000s, and to me they have ascribed thousands. And what more can he have but the kingdom?" And Saul eyed David from that day. Notice, this happens immediately after the victory. It's not like Saul's love for David cooled over time. Saul's envy of David happened the moment he was honored. During the after party, Saul turns against David. He's not like Jonathan, who delights in David's faith. He resents the glory that David is receiving. Jonathan strips himself of royal robes and gives it to David. Saul seeks to kill David. He seeks to destroy him. And in this passage, we see 3 attempts from Saul on David's life. The first is that he tries to directly kill David himself. Verse 10, the next day a harmful spirit from God rushed upon Saul, and he raved in his house while David was playing the lyre as he did day by day. Saul had a spear in his hand, and he hurled the spear at David, for he thought, "I will pin David to the wall," but David evaded him twice. Like Goliath, who met David on the battlefield with a spear in his hand to kill him, Saul, Israel's tall king, hurls a spear at David. Except it didn't happen on the battlefield. It happened as David is trying to bless him, trying to comfort him, trying to soothe him in his own house. And Saul turns against David. David escapes, and Saul tries another tactic. I'm going to send David into battle many times. And the law of probability says that David, one of those times, will be killed in battle. He promises David his eldest daughter, Merab, or Merab. And he sends David into battle. Now, to the outward eye, this may just have looked like Saul was making good on his promise. The person who would kill Goliath would receive the king's daughter. But this is the deceitfulness of envy. It smiles on the outside and hates on the inside. We see in verse 17 Saul's motive for sending David into battle. Here's my older daughter Merab, I will give her to you for a wife. Only be valiant, listen to this, and fight the Lord's battles. For Saul thought, let not my hand be against him, but let the hand of the Philistines be against him. Saul wants the Philistines to kill David. And notice how Saul tries to motivate David to do that. Saul knows that David is devoted to fighting the Lord's battles. He has seen David face a giant in the name of the Lord. And Saul says, I know what I can do. I can use David's devotion to God against him. Go fight the Lord's battles, David. Hopefully, the Philistines will kill you. Saul's not on the Lord's side. Saul is on the Philistine side. Saul is on Satan's side. Like Satan tempting Jesus in the wilderness by taking God's word and twisting it, Saul takes David's faith in God and tries to twist it to David's destruction. But God protects David, and David has great success. And Saul, it says, is afraid. Why? Because he knows that David has God with him. And rather than submitting to God, Saul continues to oppose God. He tries another tactic. Direct assault has failed. The Philistines just in battle have failed. Saul uses his daughter to ensnare David. Verse 20, now Saul's daughter Michal loved David, and they told Saul, and the thing pleased him. And Saul thought, let me give her to him, that she may be a snare for him, and that the hand of the Philistines may be against him. Therefore Saul said to David a second time, you shall now be my son-in-law. The word snare here is loaded. This word shows up over and over again in the Old Testament as a word to warn Israel about idolatry, about being ensnared to go after foreign gods. It's often used as a warning against being ensnared by foreign women to marry. Not that there was anything wrong with marrying someone ethnically different, but Christians should marry in the Lord, and Israelites were to marry those who believed in Yahweh, because the draw of idolatry was such that if you marry into a pagan family, you will be drawn to paganism. We see in chapter 19 that Michal, Saul's daughter, has a household god. Saul is an idol worshiper. Saul is a pagan. And Saul, like Balaam in the book of Numbers with the Midianite women, who having not been able to curse Israel because God wouldn't let him, devotes a plan where we will bring Midianite women to Israel, and the men of Israel will engage in relations with them, and then God will judge the people of Israel, and a curse fell on Israel to that day. That's what Saul is. Saul is Balaam here. Saul is a false prophet. Saul is ensnaring God's anointed king with idolatry. But there's a problem. David can't afford the bride price. He's from a poor family. And apparently, Saul's promised payment of defeating Goliath wasn't enough payment. Saul wanted David to pay more. It's not enough that you went out and fought the battle, and I promised you my daughter. I'm actually going to get more from you. And in doing so, and demanding more payment, Saul gives David a seemingly impossible task, a task that should have led to his death. Verse 25, then Saul said, thus you shall say to David, the king desires no bride price except 100 foreskins of the Philistines, that he may be avenged on the king's enemies. Now Saul thought to make David fall by the hand of the Philistines. And when his servants told David these words, it pleased David well to be the king's son-in-law. Before the time had expired, David arose and went along with his men and killed 200 Philistines. And David brought their foreskins, which were given in full number to the king, that he might become the king's son-in-law. And Saul gave him his daughter Michal for his wife. When I was engaged to Laura, my father-in-law is here this morning. He had already allowed for me to marry his daughter. And then I can't remember if it was a text message or if it was a conversation. But somewhere in the engagement process, he came to me and said, I was reading in 1 Samuel 18:25. That's actually my bride price for marrying Laura. He's still awaiting payment. This is graphic. What in the world is happening here? So we know the behind the scenes. Saul wants David to die. That's why he gives him this task. But what's happening here is it's actually showing that David is being an agent of God in cutting off Israel's enemies. When David is protesting Goliath, defying God, he specifically says, who is this uncircumcised Philistine? Who is this outside of God's covenant who is raging against God? What's happening here is a picture of God's covenant king cutting off the enemies of God's people. Saul set this task to David so that David would die. But because the Lord was with David, David succeeded and was given Saul's daughter in marriage. An aside here, this is definitely not the main point, but I don't know how often I'll be able to preach on bride prices. So I want to say a word of application to how Christians should think about dowries and bride prices from this passage. Many of us come from cultures where there is a dowry or a bride price to be paid. And it's right for there to be a cost to marriage. We treat things that have a cost to them as precious and honorable. When you spend a lot of money on a ring, you're not tempted to throw it away. When you save your money to be able to spend for a bride price, it shows that you are seeing a bride as worthy of your money. Just as precious items have cost, so marriage as a precious covenant should have cost. But the purpose of a bride price should be to glorify God in showing forth the value that he has given to marriage as the creator of marriage. God says, therefore a man shall leave his father and mother and shall hold fast to his wife, and the two shall become one flesh. A bride price is meant to exist to be able to show forth God's glory as the giver of marriage and to honor God and honor the institution of marriage, showing the value and the preciousness of marriage. Saul here is using marriage as a tool, though, for his own selfish gain. It is a means to greater worldly power, worldly security. He's living for his own glory and treating his daughter as a tool towards that end. Many of our own families and families from our own cultures can do the same. Parents, your children do not exist for you. They do not exist to make you money. They do not exist to give you children. They do not exist to give you retirement or status or honor or security. The main reason why your children exist is so that you can show forth the glory of God in leading them in a way that they would trust and treasure Jesus Christ and be conformed into his image, and that God would be seen as glorious and honorable in their lives. I think that a Christian approach to having a bride price is to first and foremost seek the honor of God in setting the bride price, and to seek the protection of our children in setting the bride price, and not to seek our own selfish gain. Not to set a price so high that the only way in which someone can marry your children is if they have money, and not care at all about that person's character or about whether that person is trusting in Jesus alone. But instead thinking about how are you going to get back your money that you invested in your kids? I think that is thinking only about us. Michal was sinned against by her father. Saul used her for his own selfish gain. And I think regardless of how the culture practices bride price, I think that we need to make sure that we are not being selfish when we give our own daughters away in marriage. Parentheses closed. This passage closes by showing David's success and his honor before the people. Saul saw David's victory and knew the Lord was with David, and that Michal, Saul's daughter, loved him, and Saul was even more afraid of David. So Saul was David's enemy continually. The commanders of the Philistines came out into battle, and as often as they came out, David had more success than all the servants of Saul, so that his name was highly esteemed. David is successful wherever he goes, and Saul hates it. Saul's envy is on display all throughout this chapter for us to see and be warned by. Saul is consumed by envy. He wants what David has and lives in constant fear of David because David has it. We live thousands of years after Saul. Our circumstances are different, but human nature and human sinfulness is not. We too struggle with envy. And so it's right for us to be able to use this passage to help us understand envy so that we can fight envy. And so first we're going to look at understanding envy from this passage. It's an often overlooked sin. I'm guessing if I asked you if you were an envious person, you would be taken back initially. You see someone driving a car that you wish you had, and you envy that they have it. Why did they get that car and not me? You see someone surrounded by friends in the life of the party, and you envy. You resent them for it. Why do they have everyone talking to them, and I'm over here by myself? You see someone living a lifestyle on social media, and you envy them for it. Seems like they always get to go on vacations. Seems like they have all the stuff that they need. Why don't I ever get that? Why them? We don't often confess or acknowledge envy. We may reword it with an acceptable sin. I feel frustrated with my small salary. Or I feel discontent with my small salary. You might be. But let's confess all of the sin. I feel discontent in my small salary, and I feel hateful that he has a bigger salary. Or I feel awkward in social gatherings. Well, let's confess it all. I wish that they didn't have the attention because I want the attention. You not only want a better life, you become resentful that someone else has it. Running through your heart is a sense of being wronged by someone else's blessing. A sense of being wronged by God because of someone else's blessing. Envy is a hidden sin, but this passage helps to expose it. And I think it does so by showing us 4 ways that we can see what's going on with envy in this passage. We're going to work through them just quickly here. The first thing that's evident is that envy does not share glory. Envy is consumed with the self. It is focused on the audience of one, me. The person who is at the center of an envious person's world is themselves. Saul refused to share honor with David. David was not coming for the kingdom. David's interaction throughout all of this is, why me? I don't have a right to be the king's daughter. I'm just a poor man. But Saul doesn't care. He wants the glory that David has, and he refuses to share his glory with someone else. In envy, what he's saying is, I must have it, and you must not. Church, do you feel that way? When you hear that someone got a promotion at work, is there something in you that goes out and says, that person doesn't deserve that? I deserve it. You're envying them. Do you find yourself threatened by their success? Do you look at them just a little bit different, eyeing them with suspicion? If someone else's family is growing and your family is not, if someone else is traveling and you're not, if online evangelical congregation starts bursting at the seams and Redeemer Alain shrinks, is our response to tear them down. That's sin, church. Envy does not share glory. Envy is consumed with self. And envy treats other people as tools or as enemies. Because of his envy, Saul saw David, a faithful servant, as an enemy of his. He saw his daughter as a pawn on the chessboard, a tool to be used for his own glory. What envy does is it dehumanizes people. We start treating people as less than image bearers of God and instead see them as obstacles for us to overcome, as enemies who stand in our way, or as tools for our purposes. Envy manipulates people. It turns people against one another. An envious person might also be a gossiping person. You might start sharing stories behind someone's back so that that person is torn down, or people think less of that person and more of you. You are manipulating people, using people. People become tools for your glory, your purposes. Envy creates narratives about people. It reads offenses and slights into every interaction with people. It judges people. Envy is a failure to love our neighbor as ourselves. But it's not just a failure to love our neighbor as ourselves, it's a failure to love God. Envy is rebellion against God. When we are envious, we're not only treating other people as our enemies, we are functionally throwing our fist back at God. We are saying, God, you are ruling my life incorrectly. That should have been my blessing. That should have been my prosperity. That should have been my success. It should not be theirs. I want what they have. You've made a mistake, God, and I refuse to submit to you. I am holding this against you, God. I am turning my fist and I am putting it towards you. I'm against you, God. Saul rejected God's rule over him. Saul saw God's blessing upon David, and rather than joining in and submitting to God's king, Saul sought to kill him and destroy him. Envy is a theology problem. It is a theology problem that says that God is ruling wrongly. That God is not sovereign over this, that we should be sovereign over this instead. And because of that, envy will consume us. If left unchecked, envy will dominate our lives. Saul is going to spiral in the book of Samuel. And it's all because of his envy of David. He will spend political resources. He will murder innocent people. It will consume his religion, turning away from God, seeking divination from a medium. It will consume his emotions. It will destroy his family. It will create a civil war with Israel. Why? Because Saul envies what David has. People who are envious of others become rotten to the core. I don't mean wicked alone. Every one of us is wicked. I mean hollowed out. If you are envy of other people, you will never be satisfied. It will eat you from the inside out, and it will hollow out your soul until you become emptier and emptier and emptier. And your desires and your narratives become more and more twisted. It will leave you standing by your side, thinking that everyone is against you because you want what everyone else has. And eventually, left unchecked and unrepented of, envy will drive us to hell itself. Those who live as covenant breakers in rebellion against God will be judged as covenant breakers. If this is the danger of envy, then it is very important for us, church, that we know how to fight it. It is not an acceptable sin. It is not a small sin, no matter how common it might be or how overlooked it might be. It will destroy us. And so we need to learn from 1 Samuel 18 how to combat envy. Saul's envy of David is contrasted with Jonathan's love of David. Jonathan's love for David was not envious. It was generous. It was sharing and giving rather than hoarding and taking. Jonathan's love for David was not fleeting or fickle. Jonathan bound himself to David. But Jonathan's love for David and David's love for Jonathan was not grounded in each other. It was bound by something else. The tie that bound Jonathan to David was not first and foremost a love for each other. It was a love for God. We'll look at this more in chapters 19 and 20. But in chapter 20, we see elements of this covenant that Jonathan and David make. In verse 42 of chapter 20, Jonathan said to David, "Go in peace, because we have both sworn, both of us, in the name of the Lord, saying, 'The Lord shall be between you and me, and between your offspring and my offspring forever.'" The tie that bound Jonathan to David, the chain that connected them, was God. God was the tie. It was a mutual love for each other that flowed from a shared love for God. It was a love for God's glory and a faith in God's promise. David's rise will mean Jonathan's fall. When Saul dies at the end of 1 Samuel, Jonathan will die with him. But Jonathan is okay with that. Why? Because Jonathan trusts in the Lord and delights in the Lord and is committed to the Lord and loves those and delights in those who are also committed to the Lord. He does not envy David because he is satisfied in God. The hollowed out soul of envy is filled with a love for God, so the envy has no place to go. There is no room for it because Jonathan loves God, and that frees him not to envy David, but to love David, to lavish love for David, not merely not envying, I should say, but giving and sharing. The love that we see in Jonathan and David is a Christ-like love. He is a pointer to the commitment and the love that Jesus has for his people. Jesus, Philippians 2 says, is in the very form of God, but he did not hoard glory, but emptied himself of glory by taking on humanity, being born in the form of a servant. Why? So that his glory could be shared with you and I. The God who shares no worship with another shares glory in glorifying us who are bound to him in covenant, so that we can stand honored because Christ emptied himself at the cross, that we could be lifted and exalted and seated with Christ in the heavenly places. The gospel, the message of salvation, is not a message of a God who hoards with glory, but a God who is so self-giving that he sends his own son, who will be born as a servant, nothing glorious or attractive in his human nature, but gives himself to the utmost, dying on the cross so that envious and wicked sinners can be clothed in his righteousness. This is not a fickle or fleeting love. The love that Jesus has for his people, the covenant that he binds himself to his people with, is sealed with his own blood. And if you are here this morning and you're not a Christian, then this love can be yours. You do not need to find yourself missing out on covenant love, on a love that is more self-giving than anything you've experienced in this world. A love that comes and demands everything of you, but demands everything of you so that you will be filled with happiness and pleasure and delight and satisfaction. And this experience, the love of God, is yours by receiving Jesus, by turning from the sin, turning from the envy that empties us, and being filled with love for God. And being filled with love for God drives envy out of our hearts. Envy does not share glory, but when we find ourselves satisfied with God, we want other people to be satisfied with God. We long for more and more people to delight in God as we have delighted in God. The overflow of our love for God goes to others, and we become a fountain, not the source being in us. The source is God, but through God, we become a channel of God's love to other people, saying, I want you to taste and see that the Lord is good. Our call to worship, oh, magnify the Lord with me. Let us exalt his name together. Come with me. I have tasted the goodness of God. I am not hoarding this to myself. I would love to overflow and lavish this to you. Envy treats people as tools to be used or enemies to be opposed. But those who are filled with the love of God, those who center their lives around the glory of God, see other people as precious in God's sight and bind themselves to others who have centered themselves around the glory of God. The church is to be a community of people who were once enemies. The Bible says that we were hating by God and hating one another. And yet we have found ourselves tied together, not because of our natural affinity for one another, not because we come from the same culture or background or social status, not because of our money, not because of what you can give me. The tie that binds the church together should be the love of God. That the most important thing about us is how we relate to one another, loving one another, delighting in one another, out of our love and delight for God. That Redeemer outline, this is my prayer this week, that our church would be a church that when people walk in the room, they would look and they would see these people have nothing in common with each other. They have nothing to do with each other outside of this community. They would not naturally spend time with one another. That these people must be different, and what's different about them? It's not that we're using one another to posture ourselves for better worldly gain, but it's that we come together and we say, I love you and you love me because we both love God. That the love of God is what binds us together. That our church is a church that the only thing that makes us something is our love for God. And if I see the love of God in your life, regardless of what language you speak, what culture you come from, what foods you like, how comfortable it is for me to interact with you, how shy I might be, when I see the love of God in your life, I am drawn to it. My soul is knit to you. You love what I love. You share what I share. We delight in each other. That we would be consumed. May the love of God be the sun that our church revolves around. Envy consumes us when left unchecked. But here's the thing. The flame of envy is like a tiny match compared to the wildfire of the love of God. When God's love is poured out into our hearts by the Holy Spirit, that tiny flame of envy is blown out. And raging and consuming us is a new burning passion. A passion not for this world or for our own glory, but a passion that God would be exalted in everything in our life. And we are freed. We are freed to be able to not resent people, but celebrate people. To lay aside our glory to be able to lift other people up. To give our money rather than hoard our money. To use our influence for the sake of others rather than for our own sakes. To use our gifts to build others up. to sacrifice ease and comfort and vacations and sleep and time and reputation so that other people would grow in that flame. And as the fire of the love of God spreads in the church becomes consumed by it, knit together by it. We become on fire with love, grounded in a love for God. So fight envy, church. Fight envy with a greater love, with a more burning passion, a passion for God's love, a passion for God's glory, a passion that God's name would be exalted in your relationships and in our church and in your workplace, so that when you see someone else get a promotion, rather than coveting and envying them, you celebrate the work that God has done in their lives. You pray that they would be drawn to see God for themselves. You rejoice with those who rejoice and weep with those who weep, because you are bound together by a love for God. May that be so of our church. Let's pray.